本当？見えないでしょ？どこにいるのかな？見えないよ。
What's good, Internet? It's Monday, December 7th, and you're listening to Waypoint Radio, and I want to make sure I get this right. Episode 365.
Yep.
I feel like if you go back 200 episodes or something, I was like, one day we'll have one regular Waypoint Radio episode per day in the year. That'll be a whole big thing. and here we are. We got it, 365. I'm your host, Austin Walker. Joined, you've already heard the voice of Cado.
Yo.
Also joining us, Patrick Kleppick.
Just burn that on a CDR that says 1 year of Waypoint Radio.
1 year.
Give that to the love of your life.
That's it. That's right.
Mixtapes of different Waypoint Radio segments. That's the new thing.
I just really want to share something that's important to me. I just really want to, this is something that I've been sitting with for a long time. It's really changed my perspective on life, and I just think maybe you could connect to it too. Also joining us, Rob Zacny. Hi, Rob.
Oh, I thought you were leading up to something.
No, that was just me giving the love of my life a mixtape of Waypoint Radio episodes.
Oh, okay. Well, then that was as underwhelming as my reaction was as underwhelmed as I think your love.
That's accurate. Yes.
Also,
exactly.
You handing over a CD with 365 episodes. Like, what compression are we talking about?
It's really
there?
bad.
Here's this
96.
unlistenable.
Yeah, just crunchy, just grimy. How's everyone doing today? Oh, we lost Rob. Rob's back.
Rob has been hacked, or
this is what's been
hacking?
happening to me this morning.
Things close.
There is an energy in the air today. Patrick got a blue screen.
Jesus Christ.
There really is. Patrick's blue screen. Rob just got booted from the call for some reason. Rob is back now. How's everyone doing? Are we going to make it through this week? Are we all going to
I don't know. I wasn't even sure if Rob was showing up to this podcast. I don't know if Rob does not review a ton of games, but when he chooses to climb the mountain, he chooses the most unique mountains. Last year, I'm going to review 3 games in 1 month while also go on a vacation for like a week and a half of that month. And so I was like, so when Rob takes a big swing at a review, like we even in our little chat room on Sunday night, Austin's like, hey, what are we doing on Monday morning? And I was like, well, boy, I believe I phrased it as like, I think Mr. Zacny will be joining us, but I don't know what condition he's in. I've had brief dispatches from him. The last one was, I didn't watch the Bears game. How bad was it? And I said, you should watch it anyway. It was real bad. But I wasn't sure where we at on ye olde Cyberpunk. So Rob, where are we at?
We're at the part where this game is extremely big and
Game big,
time limited.
Time limited. Side quests interesting.
Huh. Okay.
And so one can say, so here's how things began to go wrong.
I know exactly what you're going to say. Is this going to go? I think this will loop back to an exchange we had a couple days ago.
Okay. Tell me how it went wrong, Rob.
So after I've been playing Cyberpunk for about a day and a half, I was like, all right, I think I'm pretty far into this, like making good progress. Cool. Some crazy shit is popping off. Awesome first act. Holy shit, that's the opening title card.
Right.
And then I mentioned this, and I was like, boy, this game is, really kind of deceptively, it gets off to a deceptively fast start because that's an extended prologue. And y'all were like, dude, that's not supposed to be like 14 hours into the game. That's supposed to be like 6 hours into the game.
Yeah, the previews that all just dropped like last week were like, about 6 hours in, we hit the title card.
Okay, so maybe my mistake began a little earlier than that.
When I was 14.
Yeah.
On the difficulty select screen, the game's pretty upfront about like, okay, on easy, you'll just be able to blow through. And I was like, well, that doesn't sound good. And on normal, you'll have to use some of your abilities and tactics, but progress should be pretty straightforward, and you won't have to do too much. But the text for hard was like, there are no easy fights in hard. Every single encounter requires tactics, planning, making the most of your resources. And I was like, oh, you mean that's the real game?
Oh my god!
Like, and not to be a purist that way.
What's the Halo thing? Like, this is the way Halo is meant to be played on their heroic/hard mode.
And it's more that this is a game that's going to throw a million options at you. And I just know for me personally, when those options don't really do anything besides like just give you some stylistic variety for what you want to do, I have a hard time seeing like how systemically like the game actually is going to work.
Sure.
And so I kind of wanted the game to be pushing against me and forcing me to like play outside the more straightforward, ways I tend to approach things like this. So I went with the hard difficulty. And
we should say, I don't know how much we can talk about the conditions of the review. We can say
that you had you got the game last Tuesday.
Yes, that's what I'm
Monday.
talking about.
You had less than a week to play it. You are based on, I don't know what I could say of the language of the email, but I can say the language of the email that set this up in motion that I got the night before Thanksgiving strongly suggested you were among like a pretty small group of people that were playing this game on PC. We should say like none of the console stuff. We haven't seen any of those games like Rob's been playing.
I've seen the leak and it does not look good, but it's leaked.
And we don't know if that's day one. Who knows if that's
day one?
Who knows where that's at?
Right. Well, yeah. There's so much table setting here that we could be doing, and that we should probably actually pause and do a little bit because we could rewind to 2012. I saw a post the other day. Someone was like, I was in 5th grade when they announced this game and I'm a college freshman now. And I was like, I have to leave the room. I can't do this.
Well, because they put out that CG trailer with the like obnoxious, barely clothed woman, like right as Witcher 3 was coming out or right
starting
after?
The trend before 2013 was that trailer. They announced that they were going to make the game in 2012. So it's been 8 years since they made that initial announcement. Along the way, they took the exploitation-y reveal trailer and really just ran with it. There's an article people should probably go I would suggest people go read on Polygon called "It Sucks That Cyberpunk 2077's Edgelord Marketing Worked So Well" by Stacey Henley, which is about the transphobia in the marketing and in some interviews, the ways in which they leaned into across a wide range of pre-release, content and again, specifically the marketing effort into an attitude that is dismissive of the sort of criticisms around some in-game assets, specifically an advertisement that's especially transphobic and like fetishizing and exotifying. And then on top of that, there's some shit that's just like, the CDPR brand and the GOG brand have done some very like Gamergate adjacent shit over the years in a way that has like really salted the earth for a lot of folks.
And just adjacent. There are times where like the promotions is like flirting with language explicitly to like draw out a certain.
Their social team in particular seems to have a major issue, and
and when that's not been addressed over years and years, then you start to ask larger questions about the company culture, etc. On top of that, lots of reporting about the crunch culture to the degree that I don't even think crunch culture captures it. This is a studio where people talk about
announced they weren't doing crunch and then had to go back on it. Like
they weren't doing crunch, and then interviews were like, no, this is going to be the same thing it always is, which is the final 2 years are a death march. This is the death march. This is the way that like which is I think a term that we see used in the industry to emphasize that crunch is here's a 3-month period. We often see devs use the phrase death march to indicate here's a year plus, where this is not just a strenuous multi-month process because we're trying to hit a milestone, but instead this is the status quo for years of my life.
Well, when this game was supposed to come out in the spring and it gets delayed to the fall, it is not because we're going to make the developers' lives easier and spread out that that crunch period. It is, that's just this same crunch period until the fall, and then another delay, and then another delay. And each of those, combined with the fact that CD Projekt Red is a publicly traded company and thus has to make like public-facing statements, the head of their company has like fucking stepped in it over and over again.
And so that's like 90% maybe. I said half and jumped to 90%. I'm very tired. It's a lot of the table setting. The other part of the table setting for me is that the Cyberpunk, not just the genre, but Cyberpunk as a brand tied to the R. Talsorian, a tabletop role-playing game written by Mike Pondsmith, is something that a lot of folks, including me, have a lot of fondness for and nostalgia for. It was a big tabletop thing. More so, I would say, decades ago than recently, though there is a new version of it out there. Mike Pondsmith, the creator of the setting, is someone who I have a great deal of admiration for, is like someone whose work got me into the hobby. And I have a lot of nostalgia for the setting. And so for me, watching all this stuff from the outside, it was like none of the advertising for this game, including some of the trailers, including the social stuff, says that, communicates that they're going to bring the best of that setting to life here. And instead, I was like expecting a world in which this was all kind of a swing and a miss, as it was not just style over substance, but kind of chrome over heart, or something like that, right? Which is why, Rob, when you say that you've spent 12 hours in the intro, and part of the reason why that was so interesting to you is because it was such a good intro and such a well-paced intro and such like a and I'm not saying you're only at the intro, you've now played many more hours after that. I immediately was like, one, why are you playing on hard? You only have a week. But two,
it's the most Rob thing to do.
It's beautiful. I actually love it because I think that it gets to, having read your review, I think that it kind of proves its point out, because you end up having some encounters that only come out of playing that game on hard. But also I ended up being really surprised by your fondness for the way this game does end up telling some story stuff.
Yeah, so I think one of the things that caught me off guard. Well, okay, let me go through the arc real quickly.
Please. Yes.
The first impression this game makes is really bad. Out of the gate, this game does seem like the trashy cyberpunk pastiche that I think a lot of us have been dreading in some ways. And part of that is driven by just the series of tropes the prologue hits you with right away. The first things you see of Night City, like you can literally just kind of identify what movies it's lifting its inspirations from. It's very by the numbers in that way. And it totally started to feel like, wow, if you take away having a really respected novel series and short story series away from CD Projekt, there isn't a lot there. When they're sort of tasked to make something in a more conventional setting, in some ways, it kind of seems like they're just completely whiffing, and there is no real original vision there. And I think aesthetically, a lot of that remains true. I think one of the things that does still surprise me here is just how unappealing I find a lot of the look of this game. And I think some of it is intentional ugliness. Like, it is meant to be sort of a, debased, ruined society, covered in faux 80s advertising, and it's just all decay and rot everywhere you look. But at the same time, I think it is meant to be some kind of showpiece, and it is meant to look cool and evoke things that a lot of people have regarded cool for a long time. Obviously things like Blade Runner. And the thing it reminded me a lot of was Altered Carbon in some ways, because I think Altered Carbon Season 1 is kind of my postcard picture of what getting cyberpunk wrong looks like. Mm-hmm. Because it is all Austin, I think you and I literally had this conversation and you described it better than I'm about to, But basically, you take a movie like Blade Runner, and it has a style and a look and an aesthetic, but comparatively, it's understated because it's using things for effect. Altered Carbon is all the effect. Is all, all those accents become the primary color it's painting in. And that's how a lot of Cyberpunk feels. I spent a good amount of time trying to figure out which graphic settings would make the game not look terrible.
You need to release your sliders. I forgot about this.
Yeah, you need to explain what that means, by the way. That could it's not a performance. It's like strictly it's like you weren't like worried about the VSync and like going into your NVIDIA settings.
No, I mean like the game looked bad my first couple days with her. I was like, this is aggressively unappealing. And I was trying to tell Emmanuel about it, and he was like, well, show me screenshots. And then I start looking through my screenshots, and they look okay. And I'm like, in motion, this game looks awful. And in the screens, it looks okay. And then I realized it was because it's all those fucking filmic effects that are running by default, where it's like, you want the chromatic aberration on? Of course you do. Why wouldn't you? Do you want the depth of field effect? Do you want the motion blurring? Do you want film grain? And the film grain is so bad that it actually like reproduces not a film grain effect, but like the screen door effect of VR.
Yeah.
And so like there were all these post-process effects that took an already maybe overdone game and just shellacked the shit out of them with awful effects. Like the chromatic aberration was so bad that on the edges of the monitor, like you would see, say you were standing next to a bookshelf, right? What chromatic aberration does is sort of splits the outline and you have color shifting happening. There's a blue shifted part of the image and a red shifted part of the image. And you see it divide toward the edges of the frame. The effect is so exaggerated here that if you were like standing next to a bookshelf, that bookshelf would go from looking like a straight line to looking like a pretty deep V. Because the color shifting was that intense. And so of course the game looked awful because like at the edges of the image, it was like kind of coming apart in a really awful looking way. So I ended up just like slowly dialing all of that stuff back and just trying to figure out what would leave the game looking decent. And all those effects, some games I think, make that stuff work well. But this is not one of them. It was like a throwback to when you had the first games rolling out things like a film grain effect, because movies are good. People love film grain. And it's just like, that's not what this is. And it's not.
Or like Ghost of Tsushima doing that black and white mode.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which like looks really well in like photo mode. And then beyond that, it's like, all right, like what are we doing here? That's not like black and white works for a very specific way in cinematography, not with like a free floating, like player driven camera.
Yeah, so I ended up there was a lot of tweaking that to try to figure out a version of the game that looked good, and then I just started diving into it. And then the other thing is that I was going to play on hard, but Austin, you know me, I'm not somebody who's just going to roll some kind of tanky, boring, forgiving character who can just go do things. I am going to create someone a little more interesting.
A mastermind. Someone who can puppet the world around them.
But let's not go too far, Austin, because the thing is, what if the mastermind could do a little bit of everything? What if Professor X was a little less psychic? Okay. But maybe a little more jacked, but like not much. Not much.
It's the weirdest.
What if instead of like one power, you had like a little bit of all the powers? That seems great.
Yeah, could shoot a gun, could hack a little bit.
I don't see any problems arising from that.
I was like, I'm just gonna like, grab the hors d'oeuvres of these systems off the tray, and it's going to be
the Las Vegas buffet of character stat
RPGs.
building.
Yeah.
Oh, also, here's the other thing: when you're playing an RPG. And it's not explaining systems very well. But like a lot of it seems intuitive. Like, you see what body does. You see what reflexes does. But then you see a stat that doesn't really communicate anything to you right away. And it's kind of mysterious to you. I recommend dumping all the points you can into that, like straight out of the gate.
This is Rob. You did this several weeks ago when you sent me a message that said,
Hold on. This is working well in Demon Souls. Don't you dare besmirch my luck build.
But I want to be clear. When you say that, there are going to be people out in the world that go, oh, right, there is a luck glitch that you can exploit to like just roll through the game.
Sword.
Yeah.
Rob
I'm not
was
doing
like,
that.
No, Rob was like, I want to increase the grass drops, and so I'm going to dump like 7 points into luck. And my response was to just, my jaw went, one, it's beautiful because that is like a logical way to think about the game and its lack of explaining itself.
Drops
it is.
your
It
money.
totally makes sense.
100%.
Yes.
Money, souls.
At the same time, there's like
money,
souls. At the same time, there's like a luck ring you could just equip and just like have that, and then you could have had like a
what if you had a lot of luck and the
bigger.
luck ring?
All right. So anyway, there's just
give
such
us
a
money.
such a funny parallel between these two. So that one seems,
Yes.
you're happy with your Souls builds. Yeah, great. So where are you
What's
at
the
in
luck
Cyberpunk?
equivalent here in Cyberpunk?
The actual equivalent is probably technical skills and some of the skills that are in there, because that's where you find the skills that let you do things like you'll get more boost from all your consumables. You will your grenades will do 20% more damage.
Yeah.
That's none of that's worth it ever.
I was like, fuck
okay, wait.
that.
So also, it's also worth saying at this point that like we're now talking about builds, which I think it's probably fair that a lot of people who'd seen trailers for this game didn't. Those trailers talked about builds, but I don't know that it was clear that this was an RPG in this sense.
I always got the sense it was more like, oh, what's your origin story? And so like your backdrop was going to define but I just figured that was more of a narrative thing than it was a like practical, beat by beat.
But now there are like perk lists out there, and these are like big, complicated skill trees and shit. So like, is that
Did Witcher have huge skill trees? I can't remember at this point.
No. This is a little meatier. The Witcher had okay, so CD Projekt never really did nail what they wanted to do with Witcher systems.
No, the combat in Witcher 3 is abjectly terrible. Like it's just a really good world.
I think
the
Witcher
combat
2
is
is
like
probably
good enough.
stronger in terms of the action overall, like the things that potions did. Also, there's still a little bit of vestigial potion shit in this game where it's like,
oh god,
there's some food. Patrick, there's some food you can eat, and it's like just the thing you want to take into a fight with you.
I love it.
Where you're like, oh man, I had a burrito, and so I'm just going to be healing 5% a second out of combat.
That's
everything
how I feel when I leave the burrito shop.
Yeah, I can't wait to get into a fight. I got this burrito in my belly. Certainly, I can't wait to feel comfortable.
So I ended up with a character who could do a little bit of a lot of things, but also literally could just get shot by like a stray bullet and just be dead. And that wasn't ideal. But it did make for a more tense experience. And I started,
and you couldn't re-roll or anything, or you just decided to just stick with it. Like what are your options if you were not you, that was like, I'm going to see what interesting situations this leads to.
So
whereas another person might go, I think maybe I'd just rather have more strength or hacking or whatever.
I mean, you can, and obviously create a new character. You can sort of suss out what's going on pretty quickly in this game, but also it starts showering you with enough ability points and attribute points that you can revise these decisions pretty profoundly, after just a few hours, just as you spend those early levels.
Right.
I was like, I'm going to keep pushing on cool till it does stuff. And here's the other thing. In terms of the bad first impression, the game's also set up to let you do a little bit of everything and not particularly well. And so in those early hours, dude, I was like, oh, fuck, this is first-person Watch Dogs.
Right.
Like, you're going places, and, like, the interface is kind of similar in some ways when you pull up your little hacking scanner thing, and you see interactive objects, and, like, you can distract a guard by having, like, a vending machine go, just vomit goodies all over the floor, and they're like, hey, goodies. And they will always respond to that, and they will always respond to that stimuli. And so like the enemies are really dumb. The solutions to the problems are pretty obvious. Like it's all very early stuff. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, this is just incredibly obvious. These systems don't do anything. They're not interesting. This game is going to be rough. And then a couple things happened. I played enough of the game where I started to get some decent levels under my belt. I started having more interesting enemy types popping up on some of my missions. Because like one of the things this game also is doing, to set the table a little bit, at the very start of the game, your life goes to shit. And you're kind of pulled out of the gutter by your buddy Jackie. And then you go through a montage of like a year and a half of you and Jackie like working together and you getting back on your feet. And you're just like having a good old mercenary bro down that looks pretty awesome. It's like, you know, gunfights by day, watching sports with Jackie and his girlfriend at his place by night, or like dancing at the club. It looks great. I would do it. I'd be scared of dying in those gunfights, but these video game characters aren't scared. They're brave. So at the proper opening of the game, you guys have gotten enough rep that after you do that first mission, which is the thing that was shown at E3 a couple years ago, after you do that, you're immediately tapped for this bigger job. But usually, the game is also, like, Cyberpunk is usually having you wait to do the next step in a quest, or advise, like, you get little warnings, like, hey, this task is going to be really hard for you right now. You might want to go grind some levels. And the way you do that is you have your usual, like, side quests that can be sort of major with, like, an actual, like, plot arc. Or you have like the equivalent of just world events that like exist in The Witcher, where you stumble across a bunch of monsters and you just gotta kill them for XP. Here, it's a bit more like, I don't know, it's almost like the way checkpoints would get manned in Far Cry 2 or something, sure. Where, you know, you'll drive by a place and usually like 9 times out of 10, this place will be empty and there'll be nothing happening. And now there's like a little enemy camp set up. And you have to go infiltrate it, either because, you know, the people there reported up to no good, or the local fixer wants these people out of here, or there's a report that people there are just like beating the shit out of somebody, and could you please help out? And then you go in, you do these missions, and they give you a little bit of XP and a little bit of cash and some loot. And they start getting interesting. Like some of these things that have no plot set up at all, you start having pretty involved stealth encounters. Like there was this one basically arcade that had been taken over by this gang. Not like an indoor arcade, but more like a like outdoor open air, like Coney Island type place.
Yeah.
That was just kind of turned into this armed camp with these high level like gangsters and a decent mix of classes, where you have like brawlers who will come at you with like, you know, bats and shit. There were enemy net runners there who will deploy the same hacks that you deploy against you. The hacking stuff is kind of cool, but it also highlights, man, this setting doesn't make a lot of sense to me, guys. Like in the year 2020, Cyberpunk 2077 does not make a lot of sense. Like everyone's got cybernetics and shit, but it's all bad. It's like everyone, you can blind them by rebooting their optics. Nobody appears to have anything approaching supervision with their electronic eyes. Like people are just like, man, gotta get rid of these pieces of shit and like junk
my
them.
robot eyes.
Yeah. And it's like, yeah, sure, adware, blocks me out from using my eyes, randomly every 5 minutes, but otherwise they're great. My eyes can zoom slightly. I can get 1.2x zoom with these
worth it.
With these
what iPhone in my
eyes.
pocket can do better optical zoom than these futuristic robot eyes.
Well, this is the thing, right? It's like, this isn't, you're not a badass hacker at this point in the game, and you're still able to do this, right? You're not like the Major from Ghost in the Shell who can do this because she's the best, she is the best there is at what she does. You are level 4, a jack of all trades at the hour 3 of Cyberpunk. And
but isn't it also the case
everyone
that this
is vulnerable to you?
You're adapting a world in which its vision of the future was like created decades ago, and that it doesn't appear. And part of what Rob's observing is it hasn't necessarily properly adapted the like expectations of what is futuristic. 30 odd years later, I forget when Cyberpunk came out.
That's about right.
It doesn't. It feels a little bit weird when you have a computer in your a supercomputer in your pocket.
Yeah, and I think this is the other thing that really started to hit. I am not somebody who knows the Cyberpunk RPG. Like, for me, to an extent, this might as well be generic, like, hey, they made a Cyberpunk RPG. The people who made The Witcher. It's about, like, tech dystopia. And it really isn't. It is about this fucking rule set and its setting and its story, which is all based on, like, here's what the future could be in the year 1980. Here's how we think this could all break down. And so you come to it now, and it's like, dude, I can open Motherboard on any random day of the week and see like 5 things more fucked up than what this game is kind of putting out there, right? Like, this game is, basically like, man, what if there were like surveillance cameras around like warehouses and shit? And it's like, yeah, do they talk to each other? Do they talk to the police? No, then you're good. Then you're fine.
Yeah, better. Sounds like a better world. Yeah,
yeah,
a better world is possible.
Yeah, exactly.
Cyberpunk 2077.
It's like Night City police are so heavily outgunned that they're like scared to do their jobs, and there's entire parts of the city where they don't even police, and like where they do, they just kind of like hunker down and pray they don't get shot. And I'm like, all right, so police are under control. I don't know, let's hear Night City out. It has a few ideas. So like I'm getting like as I get into this game, I start to realize that okay, you just have to accept that like this is how tech went in this world. I think the USSR still exists in this world.
It does, yeah.
So they're like,
Godspeed.
The Soviets will just fix your implants for free. They got like socialized implant care over there. And people are like, I don't know what the fuck we're doing in Night City. We should go to the Soviet Union. We think we got it so good here. We're not advanced. And I'm like, okay. Yeah, you know what? Maybe where's the airport for Night City? Can I just book a ticket? So anyway, so I'm starting to figure out the systems are getting a little bit interesting. Encountering enemy netrunners is frankly kind of sweet because they do something really crucial, which is this would be a game where it could be very easy just to hunker down and like pick people off, even if you didn't have like super advanced firearm skills. But the netrunners, the things their hacks tend to do is one, it's basically like spell damage in some ways. Like you're in cover, but they're just going to start wrecking you, which is massive burst damage. The other thing is a lot of times
like overheating. They're like, are they causing shorts in your cyberware? And okay,
yes. And that will create status effects. So not only will you have the burst damage, but you'll like be on fire, which will react to other sorts of damage you get, and it'll make it worse, and everything just goes to shit. And so when you see like an enemy netrunner out there starting to counter hack you, you've immediately got to be like, I now need to go on the attack.
Right.
Like I can't, if this guy gets 3 hacks off, I'm dead. And it will not take him long to do that. So I need to like boogie over there, kill this guy from the middle of his crowd where his buddies are, not get killed by them, and then I need to like peace out.
Right.
And redeploy. And so the game does this good job of forcing you to improvise a lot of times, even in fairly routine encounters. And I think another way it does that is, you know how like in Ubi games, sometimes the patrol radius, the leash AI characters are on, is so tight and narrow that you can basically like stand outside the magic circle and be like, I'm just going to mess with these dudes. They're not going to do shit. In Cyberpunk, it feels a little more porous. Like at first, they're like guards won't patrol very far, but their sweeps do tend to get wider, and they will start like looking in places they weren't looking before when the encounter started. And that caught me out a couple times where I realized like, oh, I think they changed search radii. Like now this dude is sweeping an outer perimeter that I thought I was like safe outside of.
Right.
And now he's basically on top of me and I didn't notice because I stopped taking it seriously. And so you're kind of like, you're often in that space where you're doing a mix of like recon, thinking about how you want to attack this, executing your plan, and then seeing it go a little bit wrong and having to improvise. And that gets more interesting as different enemy types are introduced. When you start seeing like, combat droids working with, flying, gunship droids and, the mix of heavily armed assault troops. And then the game truly won me over when we got into the real shit, which is Cyberpunk's a crime epic. It's not, in a lot of ways, it is not necessarily a game about like tech per se. It's like, it is about basically like characters on the margins of the law and society, taking their shot, shooting their shot, right? Except here, that could mean that, you will not get out of this town alive. And the thing you get hooked up with early is somebody brings you a heist and is like, look, this is the brass ring. This is our big retirement score. I've given you everything you need to know. I reconned the site. Here's the background. Here's the thing. The person we're ripping off is the heir to the Arasaka Megacorp, which is like the most powerful corp in the world. And it's so clearly a cursed idea, but everyone's like, yeah, it seems like a good chance. Like
you only got to get lucky once, right? Listen,
yeah. and this
you put enough points into luck.
Yeah,
yeah. And this is, and then as you finish, and by the way, this game, the thing I do enjoy is that like in The Witcher 3, remember how even some side quests had tremendous amounts of table setting?
Yeah.
Where it's like,
there's the butcher and stuff like that. Like where like are famously like side quests that feel like main quests.
Yeah. Dude, setting up this heist was like an hour of gameplay of like hearing about, okay, who are the principals? Okay, what's the target? Like just total Ocean's 11, like here's what the score is going to be. Long survey of what you're getting into. Lots of time to think and plan. And by the end of that, I was totally bought in, where I was like, oh, I am now in a really cool heist movie. Like I am a doomed noir patsy. And I'm going to take this job and I'm going to regret it. But it's going to be awesome. And then if it wasn't clear enough, after the briefing, the woman who sort of found this job, she takes you aside and she's like, okay, V, your character's V. Okay, V, here's the deal. You know the middleman, the fixer we were working with who kind of brought us together? And fixers are like inviolable in this world and they always get their cut. And if you screw the fixer, you're basically iced out of society for ever. What if we ripped him off and didn't share the cut with him at all? And I was like, it is a lot of money. Like, you don't need the fixer if you never need to work again. And so we go into the heist, and the heist is awesome. All hell breaks loose in some really cool ways that are expected and unexpected. It's one of those things where it kind of keeps topping itself. And at the end of all that, things have gone so incredibly to shit that I'm like, well, here we go. Act 2. This is going to be the nadir. No. Credits.
Right.
Like
opening
title.
credits.
And I was like, oh no. Oh no. And then the game has its real beginning, which is you discover really what it is you stole, what the ramifications are.
Keanu Reeves enters the fray.
Yeah.
At that point. Yeah.
14 hours in, Rob gets to one of the main characters. That's a delight.
It's incredible. And I guess from there to build on that, is that basic structure then the thing that repeats? Side quests, setting up, kind of more crime noir focused cyberpunk stuff, which is like a key part of early cyberpunk, to be clear. Like, it's not like Blade Runner, the early works of William Gibson, like that stuff is 100% crime fiction, right?
Yep. Neuromancer's a heist. Blade Runner is a detective story,
right? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so does it just stay in that mode basically for the most part after that?
Yeah, but it's like different kinds of crime stories. Like, I mean, and so that's the thing is like in one story, you might just be a private eye looking into a case the cops can't crack. In another one, you are being brought in by a wealthy patrician family to be like, hey, we think somebody's messing with us in a really profound and scary way, and we're not sure who we can trust. So we're going to bring you in and hand you this like poison chalice. And now you're going to be enmeshed in the toxic politics of Night City. So enjoy that. Or you can go hang out with the smuggler buddy of yours out in the Badlands. And that's just like pure Western heist shit where like there's literally a train robbery. You're out there like you're out there with your like Mad Max convoys of cars shooting it out with the corpse. And at the end of that, I think you steal a tank. And you fuck a lot of people up with that tank. Tank's an old piece of junk, but
it's a tank. Where
there's no tanks, any tank's pretty supreme. So, yeah.
What I'm not hearing a lot of here is engagement with some of the things that I think a lot of folks wanted to hear. I mean, so far at least, you know, you're not talking about the politics of this game. You're not talking about whether or not it engages with issues of transhumanism, let alone, you know, gender or sex. Does it start to tackle those things? And if so, does it do them justice, or is it more of what we've seen in the fucking marketing?
Neither. This is the marketing is not the game in a way that like I'm kind of like, yeah, that's never surprising, but here kind of is. Like, this game just doesn't seem interested in that stuff. And to an extent, like based on what we saw in that marketing, it being less interested in that is probably to the game's improvement. But
the ad in question that ended up being a focal point of this stuff is still in the game. That remains all over the game.
So that shit's still in the game.
Right.
But it becomes part of the visual cacophony of just everything in Night City is kind of like tacky and intentionally garish and shitty. And so in terms of it getting into any themes of like gender, sexuality, transhumanism, it doesn't really, nor does it engage much with race. Like you have the Voodoo Boys, who are a high-tech gang of like Haitian hackers. And they are creating basically like they've taken over Pacifica, which is what Santa Monica basically turned into. They've taken it over and are creating like kind of a like black nationalist enclave over there. And that's as far as the game's gonna go though. Like you'll hang out in Pacifica and people will be like, yeah, like you talk to a Ripper doc there, guys who give you your cybernetic upgrades. And the guy's like, you walk in there and your character can say something like, oh man, like surprisingly clean shop you got here. And he's like, oh yeah, what did you expect? Like you came out to Pacifica and you thought I'd be a piece of shit? No man, you look around you, like, you know, this place is nothing but potential and soon the world's gonna see. And like, okay, cool. But then those dudes don't exist outside Pacifica. Like Pacifica is Haitian gangster land. Right. And they don't exist in relation to other parts of the game world, nor do they exist really in relationship to the politics of Night City in some ways. And so like you have it is a game where race exists, but it's also a game where race is pretty segregated narratively. And so you never see races regarding one another and regarding one another in relation to state power and systems. And so, when you have all that taken together, have you really engaged with race at all?
Right.
Not really. The same, like, I think the same goes for stuff like transhuman. Like, okay, here's another wild thing. Remember how there was that really shitty quote about body modification? And, every time, if you have a prosthetic limb, like, are you less human?
Right. And this is from the tabletop game. It's like the least interesting thing about the tabletop game is that you have a humanity score. Not the least interesting. It's I think the biggest missed mark is that you have a humanity score that decreases every time you get a piece of cyberware installed, unless it's extremely expensive cyberware. Because the rich people can afford this stuff, and it makes you increasingly less human until you crack and become, again, cyber psychosis. Is designed in the tabletop game as like a balancing thing, right? But like, what a very ableist, construct to be like, yeah, if you needed a prosthetic, well, let me tell you, that made you less of a human.
And that's not really in this game, one way or the other. Like, that's like,
there is no humanity score for the player character. There is no.
So there's a space on my character sheet where there might be a hidden stat. Like, I'm looking at it, and you mouse over it, and you get kind of a glitchy static icon. So maybe there's a hidden humanity stat. Cyber psychos definitely exist. There's a quest where like one of your fixers is like, hey, cops just tend to shoot cyber psychos, but I think these people just need help. So like, could you bring them in non-lethally and we can start trying to figure out like what's actually happening with these folks? Which, cool, it also generates some like decent mini boss fights where you gotta, you can't just like shotgun the
video games.
Yep, we must help the mentally ill analog in this world with non-lethal mini boss fights.
God.
Yeah, but so the game doesn't like you would expect, at least with those shitty quotes out there in the world, the game would be like, man, like all these people just torn up with these cybernetic prostheses everywhere. Like, have they lost their humanity? No, just doesn't, that never comes up. Also, it's not clear, what do these limbs even do? Like, again, you see everyone's got a fucking chrome or like metal leg, and it seems to be as busted and janky as my organic ones. So I'm like, it's weird. Like Deus Ex, you understand why people got modded. Right? Like it's about relations to labor and like what kind of work you can do and how you stay competitive. Here it's like I'm watching a dude like wander around the neighborhood with like 2 prosthetic legs, and he appears to have like bad back problems, which I can kind of understand. But in this world, it's like, did any of this help anyone? Like, is there some need being answered by this? Game doesn't really address this. It's more like, we're in Cyberpunk land, man. Like,
right.
Everyone's got a metal limb.
It's part of the aesthetic.
Right.
Yeah. Everyone's got those little implants, like running down their arms and through their faces. Like, why? I don't know. It looks cool.
Because it looks cool. Right. Because it produces an aesthetic effect, which is, I think, part of like the, I think, fear or concern around stuff like the kind of that transphobic poster or the stuff with the Voodoo Boys, which this is a quick classic Cyberpunk 2020 note. In 2013 and 2020, the Voodoo Boys were a white gang who was appropriating Haitian culture. So it's very funny that now they are just black folks. They're just actually Haitian. Mike Pondsmith, I think, was making fun of shitty white dudes with dreads. You know what I mean?
Okay. Yeah.
So, different time, I guess. This is probably, yeah.
But now they're like, this is how we honor Haiti.
This is how we honor Haiti.
Yeah. And you do get weird lines like, hey, like, you guys don't really seem to be practitioners of voodoo. And they're like, no, it's just heritage. Like, this is part of our cultural identity, but it's not a religious faith. And it was like, did one of the leaders of the Voodoo Boys just hand me like a .txt about like, did you just hand me the fact about the Voodoo Boys?
God.
Where he's like,
great.
You might think this is disrespectful to voodoo. I am telling you, sir, it is not. But so it ignores a lot of the stuff. But then a couple of the major plot arcs hinge entirely on sex workers. And then the game gets really specific about what goes on in this world and how mods are used. And so it's kind of weird where it's like the game is super hand wavy about like, why is everyone modded up? Like what does this change for people's relations to work? And then you get into the subplots with sex workers, and it's like, so let me tell you how sex happens in Cyberpunk. And it's just it's kind of a telling juxtaposition, right? It's like, where were the resources deployed in terms of like thoroughly describing what happens in this world and like how technology is used there. In terms of like remaking the economy and like humans' relationship to labor, not so sure. But in terms of being able to turn other human beings into like the vessel for whatever your fantasy is, we're going to get deep into the weeds on that. We're going to talk all about dolls and what being a doll does to your brain. And then what happens to dolls when their cybernetics basically burn out from doing this all the time because they're basically being cybernetically disassociated from their bodies. And, we're going to have an entire story around that. And the thing... I
can't tell if you think this works or not at this point.
I think it works in context. I think on its own, it works. I think in the context of where Cyberpunk puts its markers down, I think it's weird.
Okay.
Like, a little context, one of my favorite mystery writers is Dennis Lehane. And I've now gotten far enough away from Dennis Lehane where I look at a lot of his earlier work and I'm like, man, this motherfucker liked really gothic, gory detective stories. And a lot of times it hinged on like violence against like women and children. And this was kind of his thing. Like the movie Gone Baby Gone does not approach what the book Gone Baby Gone is actually doing. And in retrospect, that stuff gets weird, but like that happened across a lot of detective fiction where I think part of it was after a certain point, murder becomes passé. And there was this move to really matter, crimes have to be more and more extreme. But also they've been moving away from systemic investigations and more towards like, how do you know who's really evil? A psychosexual killer? Definitely evil. A corrupt councilman? Is that going to move the needle? Do we want to read a whole novel about investigating a corrupt councilman? I don't know. So a lot of detective fiction moved in this direction. I think Cyberpunk follows in that, and it does an okay job in the context of that story, in the context of its own story around these sex workers. But there is a prurient element to all this depiction, right? Where to a degree it is fascinated and arrested by the images of exploitation and abuse that it's conjuring. And you might be the Swiss sword of justice, like coming down here to fix or address some of what's happening here and help these sex workers get justice. But at the same time, you should spend an awful lot of time like hearing the gory details,
right?
And
which is different than I hadn't thought about this until this moment. But I mean, one of the things that your review ends up saying, and again, a thing that surprised me, was the degree to which you felt that V as a character was, sort of knightly and warm and heroic and earnest in a way that the marketing doesn't show at all. And I only just now realized that a lot of the way you ended up describing V and the way you're talking about this stuff reminds me of the Yakuza games and Kiryu and Majima and the main character of Seven, whose name I can't quite remember right now, even though I played a bunch of that this year, of being like, I'm going to walk into these people's lives and try to like turn things around for them. But those games tend not to stick to all the gory details, so to speak, right? There isn't necessarily like, yes, you do interact with sex workers in those games. Yes, you are talking to people, in the margins and doing your best to help them. And when the localization is good and the material isn't itself kind of fucked, that stuff is always very warm and unique in games. But one of the big things is like I don't think that game ever feels exploitative in its handling, or that series rarely feels exploitative in its handling of things, again, with certain specific exceptions. Whereas here it sounds like this is a game that wants to raise your eyebrows a bit by being like, huh, isn't this fucked up?
Yeah. And I think... Yeah, I guess I don't have a ton. I don't have a ton to add to that without getting into more spoilers. I think there's some of the stuff comes to a really depressingly bad ending.
Depressingly bad as in bad for the characters, or depressingly bad as in the writing doesn't work for you?
For the characters.
Okay.
This is all stuff that you didn't have a choice over, or you like, this is just like a natural, like,
because like the Witcher version of this is there are bad endings that you've earned, and there are bad endings that you could have avoided, and then there are sometimes just bad endings.
Or they're all bad endings, right? Like the Butcher quest in general, like that. All the ways that ends are like pretty rough. There are just like rougher versions of the ending along a scale.
Yeah. Okay. So far in this game. And caution warning for some brief discussion of self-harm. There have been 2 different quests, one a side plot, one a main plot, where someone you were trying to help takes their own life. In one of them, I think it might be because I didn't check on them at the right time. Like, I got one of those, hey, come back later. Talk to this person later. Huh. And then I got pulled into a series of like gunfights for 3 days, and I came back, and I come back and the police are at this person's apartment, and like they're gone. And I like, it felt terrible. It felt shocking. And this, like, I don't even know that it was a bad quest, but it was like, okay, it seems like the game's telling me that I could have done something different here just by like being there at the right time, saying open sesame at the right moment. And then there's another quest where like, it seems like no matter what you did, a character is not going to be able to recover from what was done. And the implication there being the abuse they suffered was just, it just overwhelmed them. And again, like, I think in isolation, any of these story beats kind of works, right? Taken as a whole, it's like, oh, you're kind of using that plot beat multiple times. And you're, like,
right.
In terms of the way the game is structured and the way these arcs tend to wrap up, it tends to like going to certain wells. And those are revealing. And I think that's probably one of my major hangups with the game, is that when it wants to get serious, a lot of times it's going to be speaking the language of like trauma. And beyond that, it doesn't have a lot to say in a serious tone, is the way I would put it. And so I think that's kind of a frustration. I do think some of these quests have been satisfyingly sticky, trying to sort out, like, in the wake of some of the awful stuff that was happening to the dolls. I sort of took part in this effort to like create a uprising against the people who were in charge, and real quickly it ran into the, hey, there's a lot of pressures. There's a lot of cross currents in these conversations, and I try to navigate them as best I can. But I'm like, did I fuck that up egregiously, or did I do the right thing? I'm kind of curious what the game is going to tell me in a few hours. That's another thing. This is a game that a lot of it happens over your phone. And this is another reason why I kept getting sidetracked. Your phone is blowing up all the time with people being like, hey man, you free? Hey,
Rob's just very popular.
Dude, there was a mission where I'm out there about to do a train heist with my buddy, and she's like all in her feelings about like, she's totally going against the clan. This is like, she might be exiled, but it's the right thing to do.
Clan with a C, right? Not clan with a K?
No.
Okay.
No. Yeah.
Okay.
They're a nomad clan.
Oh, okay. Right. Yes.
Yeah.
It's like the Fast and the Furious, like car, the great car tribes out in the desert.
Yeah. So, like, they're all in their feelings about it, and they're getting ready for this big heist. And while I'm out there, somebody else is texting me where they're like, "Hey, when you get back into town, we need to talk about that thing that happened, and we need to figure out what we're gonna do." And I'm sitting there being like, yeah, about to hijack train and kill Miltech mercenaries.
I think there's a tank.
Can I hit you back? And then you hang that up, and like literally as I'm sitting down next to the campfire, somebody is like, hey, are you V? Somebody mentioned that I should reach out to you. Said you're a person I can trust, and I have a case I needed somebody to look into. And I'm like, yeah, not right. Does it need to be right now? And a lot of these things are time sensitive, where it's like not time sensitive necessarily obviously in one case, if you didn't do something at a certain moment, something else happened. But a lot of them are like, you can only do this in the afternoon. You can only do this, and you can always go to the place and just click wait. But I don't know.
Do you do the Witcher meditate? What's there? Wait.
It sort of seems like you just kind of hang out and you sort of lean against a railing.
But do you do it in a menu, or you like have to go to a place?
You go to the place and then you hit. Yeah, you go to the place.
Gotcha. Okay. I'm interrupting you here, but thinking about waiting around in the city, what is the? Does Night City feel like a city, or feel like it has that sort of vibe? Because what they've shown a lot of are set pieces. What you've talked a lot about are quests. But when I think about like Novigrad in Witcher 3, I think of a place that felt really bustling even when I wasn't doing main plot stuff. Does Night City have that sense?
No. I mean, it's a big fake city, Austin.
Yeah, okay.
Like does it convince you it's alive? Not really. Part of it is because the liveliest parts are obviously where there's like quests happening, where it's like you wander into a shootout and the cops are shooting it out with the tiger claws, and sometimes I'll intervene because I'll catch a stray round and I'll be like, the fuck, and then I'll wander over there and sort it out. But other times I'll just be like, that's just a gunfight. It's not my business. Like, who am I to adjudicate this street battle? Couldn't be me. I'm not the Solomon of Night City here. But for the most part, like, it's just a big dumb fake city. Like, and here are the ways in which it's very silly. When you summon a car and your car spawns in, it will often spawn underneath another car. And sometimes that car will explode immediately. And you look down the street at where your car sprang into existence, and it is surrounded by confetti of another vehicle that was there. Like, it's total Matrix. Like, the body was just seized and ripped apart. Like, just like...
so I gotta go somewhere else to wait, but I can summon a second car and have it just cause a small, like, dirty nuke in Night City.
I have run over a lot of people by accident because the keyboard controls aren't great with the car. So like I try to hit the apex, but I just cut the curb and I just drive over the sidewalk and like 8 people die. And I drive like 2 blocks and the cops are like, fuck it. And which is good because like it's really not that kind of game. Like, yeah, there's a heat level, but I do not want to be like trying to escape the cops that much. And the game seems smart enough to know that. So you just drive away a little bit and it's fine. Those people I never talked about again, which is fine because they weren't doing anything. They were just like they were just kind of droning around the city. Likewise, the city has a lot of interesting spaces to go visit where you can go do things, but like more in the like do a mission here, have an encounter there. But like as big as the city is, it's a whole lot of buildings you can't get into. It's a whole lot of blocks where there's just nothing to interact with as far as you can tell. Which does make it very cool sometimes where you stumble into a really dense place that is full of stuff that's interactive and you're like, oh shit, this city's huge. But in terms of it convincing you that it's a city with like its own life and a pulse, doesn't really do it. But hang on, I've been remiss. I've not talked about one thing.
Yeah.
We alluded to the day one patch.
Mm-hmm. And you just talked about a car blowing up underneath another car because
that's one of their better working systems. No, Austin, that is by Cyberpunk 2077 systems, the exploding spawn car thing. That is working as intended. It's fine. No, so beyond that stuff, this is just an incredibly janky game right now. And I think when we talk about like it being a death march, like this sort of seems like a thing where if you ever ask yourself, wow, like this seems like so beyond what CD Projekt Red has done in the past and like not really their core competency as a developer, how are they going to figure out how to do this? It seems like to an extent they didn't. And it's going to be legions of QA and programmers like going in and fixing scripting, like a lot of things are going to be sort of hammered down like nail by nail because it seems like entire systems are shaky as hell. I keep having glitches where my cybernetics stop working. Like I'll pull up my scanner and the little menu that's supposed to appear to let you do hacks just doesn't. Which is bad because there's places where you basically can't advance unless that scanner is working. Like there's a landmine, like there's a minefield. How do I get through the minefield without disarming the mines with my scanner?
Is that something you fix by just doing like a save load situation, or
sometimes, most of the time, but sometimes not. Like one time, I guess I just have to hop over this tripwire rather than disarm the explosive because it is not bringing up my my scanner. I guess I could reload a much earlier save back when my scanner existed. But yeah, so I'm gonna have to roll with that. There's hardly been a dramatic moment where animations didn't stop entirely. Like it's hilarious. The big first act plot twist. I mean, like we're talking 20 minutes of scripted sequences that are like surprising and shocking and heart-wrenching and effective. It's all characters just standing in idle poses, sliding around the room.
I dropped my glasses. I dropped them for real.
Yeah.
Better animation happening on your webcam than in the game, apparently.
So I would have to so sometimes I'll just be like, I guess I have to exit and load and hope the animations happen again. Or like there was a big scene where Keanu's kind of like first conversation where Johnny Silverhand is starting to open up to me a little bit. And he keeps standing and sitting, standing and sitting, standing and sitting.
Oh my God.
And so he's like doing fucking burpees. Like while
he's gotta stay fit.
Yeah. And
I'm like, probably got another John Wick movie coming up, you know?
Two of them. They're doing back-to-back movies next, you know?
Like, Johnny, have a seat. And he's no. And so like that stuff happens constantly. There's times where it just feels like the stealth is not working. Like things are detecting me that I'm like, I don't know that I should be detected. Or it's like I literally saw a bunch of these enemies spawn in behind me, and that's why I'm getting spotted. Like I walked into a room and they all spawned. Like I was looking up, and look, there's a droid. Now it's there. And so like this thing feels like it's barely holding together. So maybe that day one patch is going to be just epic.
I hope.
Just
I
truly, transformative. But this is a very buggy game that in the busier sections where there's a lot going on, it gets worse, not better. Like, one of the reasons that my progress started to really slow to a crawl is because this shit was starting to happen so often that I was like, well, gotta stop that encounter and try to bring back my scanner.
Yikes.
Yeah. So it is in concerning shape. And that's on PC.
Yeah.
I am super curious
Can't
what
wait.
the next gen console codes are going to look like. And this is also going to be running on older hardware too, right?
It can run on
and the
launch
next gen
Xbox
stuff-
Ones, which couldn't run Fallout 4 well.
Yeah.
This is what I'm saying,
is
right?
gonna be
Like, speaking of janky games, I watched a bunch of leaked footage. That some of that had a pre-release patch of like 40 or 50 gigs on it. Some of it didn't. There have been leaks all weekend. Like, this is the thing that happens, right? And what? Who knows? Who knows what after day one patch looks like? But to me, the thing that was like so shocking was looking at an Xbox One S versus a PS5 streams for those two things. The Xbox One S version is just like, the city is empty. The people are not walking around. Nothing is happening. There's like very strange, like dynamic resolution stuff happening to try to get the game to just function right on that hardware that makes things seem to fade in and out of existence. Again, all of this is pre-patch. You know, this is retail copies, people who got their Best Buy copies and they were like, fuck it, I'll stream it. I don't care. Give me a DMCA notice, which also really quick. CDPR has also like been filing DMCA takedowns on things that are not even like new gameplay. Someone who got a retail copy, played through it, and put up a review, who had not signed an NDA, who had not agreed to an embargo, had his review taken down from YouTube via DMCA, which is just an abuse of DMCA. That doesn't, there's nothing there that is protected copyright for them to be able to do that. But you can't win that case. You know what I mean? You're not going to take.
No, they have the power. They're technically
Yes.
allowed to do this, even though it's complete
bullshit.
That should be allowed.
You know, there was a post on Twitter over the weekend about the use of a Maori like facial tattoo that again got pulled, which that did at least have, you know, an image. But if what you're doing is like going after people who are critiquing your use of cultural signifiers by using DMCA to take down that critique because your game isn't technically out yet, even though people who bought it legitimately have it in their hands, and that's where these assets
your
came
game went
from.
gold, and then you delayed it after it went gold. Like, what do you think was going to happen
at that point? It has been published; it's out there. So, like, again, I think that side of it is a fucking mess. So yeah, I don't know. I think we're going to see some like base PS4 and Xbox One stuff that is really wild to look at. Which is important. I think the important thing to remember is like most people don't have a next gen console. Most people don't have a great PC with a good graphics card. This is
also the next gen version isn't the next gen version.
Right. That's the other thing. Right.
It is a half step in which there are some improvements on the new Xbox, the new PlayStation, but the next gen patch with like fancier effects, like I don't know
ray
exactly
tracing
what the
or whatever
details
it's
are.
going to be,
whatever they're going to do, like they basically punted on that, and they're not alone. Like several developers have done that, and there are, I'm sure some of that's COVID related, and this game being just a nightmare to get out the door. That's not happening until they said next year-ish. Like I wouldn't be shocked if that wasn't until well into the spring. Which, based on some of the things that Rob is saying, like it might, like there are a lot of games to play, and maybe this game has turned out like surprisingly better than we would have thought based on the marketing and what we had seen. But you also might be in like the best like boat possible if you just give it 6 months to like figure itself out. There doesn't seem to be a lot. The reviews are all hitting right now. Like all the reviews are sort of like, like. Like that's like I'm sure some of them were positive than others, but the reviews sort of seem to be like, well, here it is. Here's Cyberpunk.
Here it is.
There's moments genuinely I can see myself loving this game. Like some of these quests, I'm like, this rules. Like this is what I want. Which is
what I expected from this game to be. Yeah. I've been all along thinking like, I think this is gonna game with like some exceptionally strong writing hidden in packets. in a way that The Witcher had, but The Witcher just had like a better base, a better floor.
But really,
it sounds like Witcher's floor and Cyberpunk's floor is so much lower, which is maybe then going to make like the good quest feel higher, just like because it's like relative to what you're experiencing on a moment. Like it was just so enjoyable. Like I hated the combat in The Witcher, and it was too long. But boy, I just loved walking around that world and just bumbling into things. And it just seems like in Cyberpunk, at least what you've encountered so far, is that just happens less often. And the highs just aren't as high, and the lowers are a lot lower.
Yeah, there's no equivalent for like you would stumble into a really quick narrative beat in The Witcher, where like you'd see a cool like tail end of someone else's story, or you'd be there for like a cool moment. That's not
something that should have been a collectible in another game. Is like like a little 5-10 minute authored piece of content that like tells you something about a character or the world. And The Witcher 3 is just fucking full of that shit. Even if what you're doing, the actual like mechanics of like the combat or actions of the player are rote, there's just like enough narrative flourish that like you remember that sequence. Like it's part of what makes that game special and have power. It just seems like there's not as much as that. Here.
No, in a lot of ways, in terms of how it feels more like The Witcher 1 to me than, and I love The Witcher 1,
sure,
but also you had to really like go out and meet it on its own terms.
Well, that game they had to basically like the special edition of that game is like a pseudo remaster with like huge like changes to the systems. I remember, Vinny Caravella playing that original Witcher, and it was like with like the biggest caveats in the world of like if you're gonna come play this game before they went back and kind of beefed it up as they moved towards Witcher 2. So I don't know. I guess I'm like pleasantly surprised that it's not as much of an abject, like the glitches I don't worry about as much. I mean, it sucks because the conditions in which those glitches have come to arrive were probably horrendous. But in terms of my expectations of like how you were going to speak to the story, like almost like it not being like a complete trash fire is like a pleasant surprise, which is a weird place to be with a video game. I don't know that necessarily makes me like super excited to, in some ways, you have reassured me like as I'm hitting Game of the Year time and I'm going, what do I need to spend my time with? It's like when my Cyberpunk code shows up this week, like I'm going to make sure I finish playing the Pathless and I'm going to finish making sure I play a handful of games. Like I want to play it. I want to like see what it is, but I don't know that it's like on a sprint to when we have to record Game of the Year podcast that I need to scream through 12 hours of Cyberpunk to like figure out my thoughts.
It is very rare that I feel relieved that I didn't have to, like, I'm so glad I didn't have to review this game. Rob, you took a bullet for me. I can play this thing slow. I don't.
We
need
had
to
long conversations back in like,
it.
What was it, September? We were like went through a release schedule and it's like, all right, Austin, you're gonna have to play one of these. Like Rob, you're gonna like you were just the people for this. I'm sorry.
I flat refused to play Watch Dogs. I was like, I'm not doing it. I'm not.
Well, again, I had that history with Watch Dogs where it's like, I bet I can find an angle here.
Yeah, I knew Austin could get through it, and I knew I couldn't. And I knew I could get through. Like I could get into Cyberpunk, whereas Watch like I've already bailed. Sorry, Legion.
Yeah.
But
which is like, well, I think that's the other half of that. Rob, I know you have to go. You're your heart out, but I think it's very interesting, and maybe in a future episode, once more of us have played Cyberpunk, the ways in which those two games are in conversation with a notion of the future, a notion of Cyberpunk as a genre, etc. I'm very curious about because Legion left me so excited in so many systemic design ways and so flat on so many other ways, and this feels like the opposite. Nothing here feels like a grand step forward in game design, and yet it sounds like some of the smaller, more human stories are the sorts of things I love the most about good RPGs. So we'll see. I don't know.
I'm more excited about the expansions to Cyberpunk, given like
the history of
maybe if like the history of CD, like some of the best storytelling in The Witcher 3 like happened in those two expansions. So maybe with like this off their, the big foundation out of the way, there'll be like a chance for better storytelling in the future.
Sounds good. All right, Rob, you should head out. We'll take a quick break and we'll hit a few more little things before we wrap up. I know.
Can I just read?
Yes, please.
I don't want to hold Rob up anymore, but the reviews are hitting it, so there were just a couple of Gene Park at Washington Post. He had one of his in his tweet thread about his review. It says, Cyberpunk is a buggy mess. The game wasn't as bad for me at the start, but towards the end of the game, it started to collapse. Every main character was touched by hilarious bugs. I think this speaks to a lot of what I was saying. It says, the last frame before credits was bugged. I thought it was the actual ending.
Oh my God. Incredible. I briefly read through Carolyn Pettit's review over on Polygon.
I'm super excited. Polygon.
Me
assigned
too. Carolyn fucking
her to play
rules so much, and her copy is so clean here. It's so smart. People should go read that.
Go sign up for. She has a lot of great posts
Yep.
on I believe Medium. She
yeah.
writes privately. She does a lot of really good stuff.
She's fantastic. So good reviews out there. I'm glad to see folks doing. You know, I'm glad to see the folks who are here. Cameron
Finding good folks to like review these games.
Cameron Kunzelman, 10 minutes into review posting, we've discovered what we knew the whole time. Cyberpunk is a land of contrasts. I could just read Twitter right now. I could just read Twitter into a microphone. That's content, baby. Steph Tinsley says, well, now you know why only certain folks got review copies. Whew.
Well, I mean, we should I will say,
Yeah.
I was genuinely surprised
Me too.
that. So okay, I didn't sign any fucking contracts.
That's right.
The way this game is going to be mostly distributed is through an external PR firm.
Yes. Who we've worked with for years
they
about a
openly
billion
talk
things.
about-
One of the games I'm going to
Yeah,
talk about in the next segment, I got a code for through this external thing.
Yeah, it's a really good they're in terms of
the
working
best
with PR
thing
firms,
in the industry for getting codes for coverage.
Evolve PR.
Shout outs to Evolve.
I'm gonna give a shout out. They're great, really good and easy to work with. And they are supposed to be handling the vast majority of code distribution of this great website where you log in. It's it just makes it super easy for our job and their job to meet halfway. And then I mentioned this earlier, the day before Thanksgiving, I'm sitting down, watching Wishmaster and sipping a scotch and relaxing. Kids are asleep, family's asleep, and I get this email that's by the way, directly from CD Projekt Red. That's hey, we're sending out codes just for this PC version. And that's where the implication is there's a large circle of people who are getting access to this, and then a really small circle. Yeah. And the reason I just think it's worth pointing out is because we were never contacted to be involved in any of the pre-release coverage, which if I was a PR person, I would not have done either. We were very skeptical about a lot of this game, that if your job is to get people to write good things about your game to generate hype and interest, we would not be an outlet. We would be an outlet on a list that was they're probably going to be skeptical and the coverage may not come out universally positive. So maybe don't involve them in pre-release. And so none of that shocked me. But I was kind of shocked that we were included in that final circle, which I'm not necessarily saying to their credit necessarily. I just think it was interesting.
It is
the way it played out.
It is. If I was still the EIC of Waypoint, I think I would be making a big stink about the way this shit was handled. Not only because I think that you get bad reviews when you have to churn through a game really quickly. I don't want to be.
Gene Park said he finished the game at 4 a.m.
This is what I'm saying.
I don't think did Rob finish it.
No, Rob didn't
I don't
finish
think
it.
He's finished
He's deep into it
because he shouldn't have.
No,
that's what a reasonable person
does. It's you don't get good criticism out of needing to rush through a thing. I'm cautious about the
which is also I don't know the CD Projekt did
yes,
this, but that would be a strategic. It is possible that this game code that came to Rob and this select group of media was because that was quite literally the first moment they could deliver.
In a non-COVID year, this feels so much like one of those games where they fly 10 people out to a hotel to do the review coverage.
No, you're going to the studio.
Yeah, you're right.
You're going there.
Exactly. That's exactly it. You're going to play it all
studio
there.
Tour.
Yes.
You'll play it there. That whole thing. They're definitely the kind of old school studio that would want to do
totally.
That.
The fact that the other half of this is if you were not on that list if you were not Rob Zacny or IGN or whatever, if you were one of the many, many, many other outlets who are really hungry for views, not only did you not get a code with enough time to play the game to have a review today, you were just kind of left in the dark in general because of the way that CDPR ended up delivering the code themselves and not going through the PR company the way that shit normally works. And
also how it was communicated ahead of time.
Yes,
was the whole idea was leading up until this split was, hey, just log into this very useful website, put down which platform you want. When the code's available, you will get an email that says, click agree to embargo, and then there's the code and you redeem it. And the reason I just think it's worth talking through this process because it is, like I said, it is possible this is last Tuesday was the first delivery date. They were being like, you can try and like carve out all these caveats. The thing is, what we've experienced the last couple of years with CD Projekt Red is there's reasons to be skeptical of those caveats. But it's also like a condensed review period. Not only does it produce poor criticism, it is also naturally going to, from the reviewer's perspective, there is doubt in your ability to like fully like criticize and understand the thing that you are playing. And thus, in general, a history of having played games and reviewed games for, 20 plus years, like you're going to be more forgiving because you can't get out your sharpest knife because you haven't had time to sharpen it.
Yep. That
is both praising a thing and criticizing a thing. Criticizing can be praising. That word is can be used in weird ways. But it's harder to fully understand how you feel about a thing if what you're doing is spending 6 days cramming and then having to spit out 1,200 words about that experience.
And right now what we have is a handful of reviews from all of the the most major sites, only for PC builds, nothing from any of the console builds, nothing from sites that are small and again would desperately need to have a review out today in order to compete for traffic. There's a lot of how this comes together where I just end up feeling so frustrated with the way that it was handled. I'm glad Rob was able to play, what he played and get down some really thoughtful words about the game. I'm glad that he didn't push himself to try to do the Gene Park.
Which is also why we do that. Like, I think, like, to be clear, like there are like mysterious traffic things that people that are not Rob and I like think about, but like it is not the case that Rob and I wake up every day and are. Basically, we operate how we want to operate, and then if people tell us like, "Hey, if you could post more frequently, it would help." Like, it's not other things like don't exist, but it's not something that hangs over our head. You got to
note every 8 months, someone says, "Hey, we really need a few more posts this week because there's like not a quota, but someone high up has decided this month we really want to push."
And that stuff happens, and like people like Emmanuel and Jason we work with who worry about that stuff more than we do, and to their great credit, allow us to just sort of like do what we want to do until we're told that, change others. But I just wanted to make the point that part of the reason like Rob wanted to do this and like to make sure we also understand that for our audience specifically, they want to know how to feel about it. This is like a game where like people have like a lot of complicated feelings. They are excited for it. They're also worried about it. They're not sure what it's speaking to, what it's not speaking to. Is it like explicitly from top to bottom a transphobic video game that needs to be dumped into like the Harry Potter box? And so I think part of the reason like Rob pushed himself to get something together is understanding like people want to know what we have to say about what we think about it. It's important to them. And like that is not unimportant in why like the traffic stuff is helpful. But I think part of the reason, Rob wanted to do that was like he had something to say and also knows that it is worthwhile to our audience and they want to hear that. And so, Rob delivered. Rob, his one review of the year, the one that like he wants to climb a Death Stranding mountain. Where I'm like, Rob, what are you doing? Like, but he did finish Death Stranding, but he really fucking liked that game. I don't think he would have finished it otherwise. So
anyway, we should take a break and we should come back to talk about a few other little things, and then we'll wrap up because we're already going long today. So. Longer than we also had some tech issues at the top of the podcast that we're not going to go into the podcast.
Rob, kind of at the end, like if you have any of that recorded, can you do like, hey, you want to hear with like some weird shit that happened to Rob's audio?
Just really,
turn down your headphones and here's the last 10 seconds of the podcast.
Make sure it's not too. I'll soften it a bit for the listener.
Rob went far enough away on I'm going to reset my machine that we became. Do we need to text Rob?
Okay,
like
Rob fall into
did his PC blow up?
God.
Anyway.
All right, let's take a break. All right, we're back. This is probably not going to be good, podcast fodder, but I'm going to say it anyway. I watched a Let's Play of Bloodborne over the last week and a half. Okay. Because I was like, hey, I haven't rewatching it. Definitely I just see Natalie beat it over the last couple of years. And it's like enjoyable. I definitely think I like that game more to watch other people play it than to play it myself. But even still, I just felt like, God, I really wish there was just like a little bit more environmental like variation in that game.
That game more than any other in the Souls canon would have like been modded to death. I think Bloodborne would have.
Totally right.
I mean, not that like the Dark Souls hasn't like had a lot of really cool mod stuff, but I just think there was something like especially unique about Bloodborne that I think it would and still would if like it, if they eventually do the fabled PC version, that it would have like a really rich community.
Totally,
because that would be like. I don't want to replay that game, even if they did like a 60 FPS patch on PS5. Like, I want to play that game with a mod that like turns the health into an Estus flask. Like, I don't want to. Like, I don't want to play that game and fight the two trolls to the left of the opening area that are easy to mine the health drops and just do that for
with
2.5 hours. With the bricks because they dropped them. And if you just did that for 2 hours, you could fill your chest and like. And basically, like, oh, I'm good for about 15 hours before I have to worry about this again.
Exactly.
And what I'd like is just give me an Estus flask because that's what you did. I can only carry 10. Like, you built an Estus flask, but then made me have to grind for it anyway. It drives me crazy.
Cado, what were you gonna say?
I was gonna say, like, I was farming stuff in Demon Souls last night and wondering why it didn't chafe me as much as it did in Bloodborne. And I think
you have more options in things drop more often in Demon Souls. You're getting lots of grass. You have magic that you can compensate for if you want to.
Sure.
Like my build has just enough magic to let me cast health 3 times on a run, which like
nice.
Which extends a run like exponentially, like especially if you're in like a in the final world or something like that, where you're just kind of like slowly inching forward. And also, like, okay, so your health is too good for the light grass, but you know what? You could use 6 of those,
just use
and
6
like
of
you've
them.
gotten your health back. I just think it drops more. You have more variety of options, and the way, at least I found over the course of Souls, like the amount of souls it costs to level up. There are some times where you're like, fuck it, I'm just going to spend all that on grass and just not worry about leveling up. At least I found myself doing that sometimes. Like, I've only got 10,000 and I need 35,000 to level up. I'm not going to hoard it. I'm just going to spend it on grass and move on with my life.
I feel like part of it also helps is a lot of something about like, okay, I'm going to go get prepped for this boss fight, but having to go to specific places to gather certain materials helps it feel more like you're going on a preamble journey, like, I'm going to go to Boleteria Palace because that's where all the fucking health stuff drops. I'm going to go to Tower Latria and pick up some MP refill shit.
Yep.
Do a run to level up my weapon a couple more times at the fucking the second 2-1 or whatever.
Yeah.
And so then, like, by the time you're like
I love
there,
that part
it's
of
like,
that game.
I've been like around a bit, but it all like kind of meshes instead of like being the 2 ogres on that one staircase. It's like this place has that feeling of like, this is where you get the health stuff from because that's where they used it the most, or like,
and you've got like the item that like increases your drop. Like, I mean, there's like, you just get more flexibility or like it allows you to go into, when you go into grind mode in Bloodborne, I guess not satisfying. Like, you're just there. Like, you're just in it. And in Demon Souls, it feels like there are like multiple things you can be accomplishing on like a grind. I don't know. I find it to be less grating in Demon Souls, whereas Bloodborne is like maybe one of my like top 3 favorite games of all time. And yet I feel like it has this fundamental flaw that I would mod out of the game happily and thus enjoy it more.
Patrick, the Pathless. Tell me about the Pathless. I mean, I've talked about it, but
it's great.
You're all the way on. You like it.
I really like this game a lot. I started. I've been banging through. Like I mentioned before, a bunch of sort of like Game of the Year candidates, and this was one of them. Once you had spoken to like movement is big.
It feels so good to move around in that game.
To a degree that I wish there was more movement mechanics. There is a thing that happens, the game structure where you're fighting these various like colossi, big beasts in different areas. And then after you finish the second one, the game, like these little hooks that you're shooting to gain your like sprint meter, they add variants that like supercharge you, like it's a turbo speed. I just want the moment that was introduced is like, I wish that had been there from the jump or much earlier. And then in addition to that, I just wish there were more. I just wish there are times where I'm going 2 or 3 minutes where like from one part of the map to the other, and it's a big map, and I'm fine without the fast travel. I think the game benefits from having you engage with the movement systems, but I just wish I had more. Like in Spider-Man, for example,
right?
When I am spending 2 to 3 minutes, going across a map, and in that game, I'm choosing to do it, and the game is gambling that it is so enjoyable to do that 2 to 3 minutes that you're not going to want to do the fast travel. We're going to give you so many different things you can do on your way there, whether it's tricks or it's L1 and X, so that you're like shooting to like a piece on the roof of something. Like you have like a bunch of options, and you don't have to do them. You can just hold R2. You can just
very
swing,
fun to do the other stuff.
But it's so much fun to do the other stuff. And I wish the Pathless had more of that, because there was like a sequence in a boss battle where I accidentally got the like acrobatic trophy, which is where if you are jumping in the air, and you shoot one of these little icons, you do like a flip and you can stay in the air. You're largely meant to do that when you're like floating with the owl and are kind of like going from ding, ding, ding. But I had this sequence where like I hit like 4 of them in a row, and I'm just like flipping in the air and also shooting at an enemy, and it was just beautiful. It like felt so cool, looked so cool. And then when I got back to the main map, and I was like, well, I'm gonna hit like 10 of these basic icons in a row and run fast. Like I just wanted more. Like, give me more reasons to shoot to the sky. Like, give me more reasons to dive down. And it's fine, but it just, I'm clearly in the back half of the game. It's not particularly long, but if like, I really actually hope they make another one of these, or something that like plays in the same space. And all I would want from that would be give me more, like more moment to moment movement options, because it is just such a joy to be in that space. And all I want to do is just give me a different thing to do as I'm looking for the next icon. Because I don't know. I do wish there was a map. Like it's like super frustrating to like get to the end of an area.
Even if you only got one at the end of an area, that would even be good.
That's what I think they should do. I think it should,
and then give me a map so I can do cleanup.
Because like for the structure of the game is you only you're doing these puzzle areas that give you little pieces that let you unlock the different pillars. And once you unlock a couple pillars, you can fight the boss. But then it's clear. It's like, oh, hey, there's a bunch of things you didn't find. If you collect all of those, something else will happen that's optional.
Thing. Yeah.
I don't know what it is, but it's a lot of them. It's like, oh shit,
it's a
like
lot.
I collected 8, and I thought I'd really been paying attention. And the game's like, no, actually, there's like 12 more that you didn't find. But there's no easy way to do that. In the first area alone, I was like, oh, they just go to the top and look around. I'll see it. And it's like, no, I'm not seeing it. I clearly need to like go around. I'm not going to look up a walkthrough. And at that point, if I can't find it easily, I want a map. Or just, give me at the end of the game, I want the game to go, hey, do you just want to go find all the puzzles? Like, boo, we've given you a superpower that like Mart really, you just hit that secret vision and like you can just clearly see all of the puzzle locations across the map. So all that said,
You're really liking it. Yeah.
I really like it. And the boss battles are spectacular.
They're really good. So I've done the first. I think I've done the first 2. I did the deer is the first one, and then I did the lizard after that. I want to say, which has like the sequence where it's like it's sort of like the dragon god demon soul sequence.
Yeah. Yes.
And that was good. I think I just need to get over my completionist. If I just beat the game, I'm sure I'll have a good time. You know what I mean? I just go back into it. Do enough to get the win.
I just embraced that. Was just even though this is a game that if I was given the tools, I would go back and clean, because we were talking about Immortals, and that is a game. It's playing this in contrast to Pathless was really fascinating because the puzzles are so good in Pathless. They are so much.
They're much better than Immortals.
Whereas I go into a vault in Immortals and it's like, ugh, all right, like time to move these things around. I get to a puzzle in Pathless, I'm like, ooh, time to move these things around. Like it's the puzzle structures are really not that different. You are doing a lot. Like very similar.
Grab the weight
play
and place
spaces.
the weight on this pressure plate, and that moves
there was one
shit.
I just did in Pathless where all you're doing is pressing on a button, and then like 4 different like circles are like moving in front of you, and you have to time the arrow so it moves through all of them at the same time. And it sounds so simple, but the timing is just like so specific and weird, and it was just so much fun. Like, all right, just roll it up again. Like, send those motherfuckers across. Like, and I'm gonna. And then the time that I got them all to go.
Wait, did you find the one that's like that, except you have to run along with it?
No, but that sounds
really good.
That
it's like there's
awesome.
like 4 targets, and then there's one that you have to like you yank it, you pull it all the way back, and then you let it go, and it slowly starts going around. And so you have to like run alongside of it and make sure that you're lined up as it hits each of these like checkpoints basically on its path to shoot through it. It's very good. I mean, and I think,
and I wish you could pull up a map and like, hey Patrick,
this
like
is
you
where
should go
it
do
is.
this puzzle. And there's an activity thing that like shows up on my PS5 UI, and it's like, Austin sent you this puzzle. Do you want to go do it? Yes, I do.
Right. Totally. What was I going to say? Fuck. I just think it speaks to like how important game feel is. You know what I mean? I think it feels so
it's fun
good
to move in that game. And actually the fact that it's like so they make it aggressively unfun to not be like just walking like there are a couple of
in that game.
It's really not fun. There are a couple of sequences where they purposely like disable like your eagle friend, and you have to just kind of walk, and there's not many areas to like charge up your sprint meter, and you have to do some sort of platforming stuff, and it's fine. But like in the world, like there's a different version of this game where they made it a little more fun to just walk, or like you're a little faster. But I like the fact that I hate it because it then pushes you like, no, you need to keep engaging with this specific system. It's not unplayably unfun. It's just sort of like, this is not the game. And so they contain it to very specific sequences where you walk. And I don't, yeah. So yeah, the story's whatever. Yeah. Like I actually kind of stopped like looking at the dialogue things, and the lore just, okay, fine. Like the visuals are great. The movement is great. The puzzles are great. That's what I'm here for. And I like read enough of the story stuff to be like, I don't need to seek out any more of these like stone tablets. There's just not enough going on there for me to want to actually do it. But all the other stuff is terrific. It makes me excited because that's the arc of the studio is one. I'm glad like their mechanic stuff is getting better. It like makes me really excited to see what they would do after a Pathless, because it just like from Abzu to this to whatever they do next is really exciting. So yeah, definitely I highly recommend checking out Pathless. I echo that it's good shit.
It's good.
And I'm
excited
to see the end of it.
I keep telling myself to go back to it because when I'm having a good time in it, I'm having a good time in it. And that's just, you know what I mean? So, I got 2 quick shout outs.
Go.
One, there's a game that's an isometric, Souls-like Bloodborne-y thing. I don't think it's super good, but I think that there's like some neat ideas in it. It's called Morbid, the Seven Acolytes. It's on PC. It's interesting to play one of these in an isometric perspective because that's not normally, you get a lot of like 2D sprite based ones. Like, what's the one that you love, Patrick? Blasphemous, right?
Oh, sorry. Yes, Blasphemous.
Yeah, or there's been a bunch of these.
There's a bunch of those. I think Blasphemous is the best of the like 2D Souls sort of thing.
I mean that's what it seems like from talking to people. I've not played I think any of them really. This has some like interesting skill stuff where you do get like a build in which you're doing things like increasing how many Estus flasks you have, increasing how much your stamina regeneration. And kind of building stuff out of kind of these kind of, I guess I would describe them as being like cards almost, that you can kind of slot into your like inventory of skills and upgrade over time.
I'm looking at a gameplay video right now. Morbid the Seven Acolytes is a horror punk action RPG. Never heard horror punk before.
It is.
That's the first time I've read that. Look at that giant frog.
There's a big frog. There's some like cool enemy design and stuff. It's fine. Like I think the enemy design is really cool. I think that there's like a I think it lore dumps way too quick in a way that's like you can't ask me to care
like
that
even
quick.
This trailer is already trying too hard.
100%.
I mean, it's called Morbid: The Seven Acolytes.
100%.
It's tipping its hand. Like,
yes.
Did you really need the subtitle?
No.
Like, couldn't it just
Morbid
would be
enough.
better actually? Yeah. Same with Blasphemous. Blasphemous is like a really evocative. Yes. The lore of that game really lends itself to the Seven Acolytes or something like that, something aggressive. But like Morbid, I don't know, like your brain. I'd be curious how decisions like that happen, because I feel like Morbid tells a story in your head already. Like your imagination goes off of a word like that. So
yeah, I put a few hours into it and enjoyed myself. I played through the first like 3 or 4 areas. I got like through the first. I think I got through the first of the seven acolytes. So to speak, and you know, I think like the boss encounters are not super good, but there is something about the fact that 1, there's a stealth system in this game, and then 2, and it's like a very straightforward stealth system. You just like have a button to kind of like sneak around, which is like an interesting difference from most similar games. And then 2, there's a lot of like. You get a gun in this game, and it is much more of a gun in the traditional video game gun sense than like a Bloodborne gun, which is mostly a parrying implement. Like you can do a blood tinge build and you can do damage with guns, but by and large in Bloodborne, you're just parrying with it. Whereas here, like you could straight up be like, no, I'm going to upgrade the shotgun so it's really good at clearing ads. And the game will end up putting a lot of like stuff on screen that will just be small, easy to shoot or easy to fight, or easy to kill things if you can get a hit in on them. But there'll be a bunch of them. And so like switching from a pistol to a shotgun just so that I can like quickly clear a bunch of ads felt like, okay, yeah, that's a neat distinct thing. And also felt appropriate for an isometric game like this, where you know, you're playing in a similar space to some top-down stuff like Binding of Isaac or something like that. And it's like, okay, I'm glad that there's like a little bit of overlap in terms of understanding that this is a strength of this design, you know, focus. That like, hey, you can feel overwhelmed. I can put a bunch of enemies on screen. I can give you the tools to quickly clear those enemies off screen, etc. You know, I don't think that it's like a home run, but I was like, I had a pretty okay time with it. It should be on someone's radar. Someone who's like, yeah, I would like to play one of those. You should know that it's out there.
Yeah. Is that on Switch or just PC right now?
I think it's just PC, but you know what? I'm
that game is that game is destined for Switch.
That is exactly right. Yeah, you're totally right.
The prophecy has foretold that this game
will be coming to Switch. Absolutely.
Did you see the tweet from the Umurangi Generation Twitter account
with the fucking
Switch
version? Where he's like moving the Switch to move the camera?
Yeah.
It looked good. I'm very excited.
The gyroscope is like not used at all in the Switch, basically. Understandably, because you don't know if people are using docking it or using the Joy-Con.
Shout out to the fucking shrines in Breath of the Wild that use that shit.
That's right. The other thing I want to shout out really quick is Solasta, Crown of the Magister. Speaking of subtitles,
okay, you are just not. Did you just like sort Steam by
longest
title length,
please?
You say that one again. I want to Google
Solasta, Crown of the Magister. Solasta, Solasta. This is, you know, Baldur's Gate from Larian this year is probably the biggest D&D game that's coming out in early access in 2020. It's that, you know, Baldur's Gate 3 is really polished. It's really incredible kind of graphical style. It's very pretty. The characters you can create are really great visually. It's playing in a lot of the D&D sandboxes that people already know and love. It's using a modified version of D&D 5th edition rules to that people know really well. Solasta is like, nah, that's not real D&D. We got this shit. We got the real shit. You know, Baldur's Gate got this, and this wrong. This stuff is a little too, dumbed down, whatever. And so Solasta is like a step beyond Baldur's Gate in terms of complexity. Like, for example, it's a game that really cares about light sources and whether or not you're doing stuff from within torchlight or not. Because if you're not, that means you're at disadvantage. And it takes that shit very seriously. And so it's just like, it's a fucking D&D ass D&D game that I don't think I would say it doesn't have that style of like the flair that comes out of something like Divinity Original Sin, in terms of like ability interaction or whatever. But instead, I think that it's just kind of a good tactics game built off of a rule set that a lot of people know because D&D is so popular. It's the encounter design has been really cool so far. And it feels like it basically feels like a sort of GMing or sort of like tabletop experience that I don't necessarily do myself, either as a player or a GM, but that it kind of nails in terms of the sort of dungeon crawl, the big battle, the like, the needing to have a really well balanced party, and also it's a little more polished than I thought it would be. When someone first pitched me this game, they were like, "Listen, there are 3 faces per race in this game. You're not going to have super customizable characters. Everything is a little, rough around the edges." And that's 100% true. But like, there's like totally decent voice acting in this game. I think the armor design is all pretty good. I think some of the locations look dope. And it is D&D 5th edition in a unique setting, and I think their own setting. But the basics are all basically there in a way that, like, I think if you were someone who is looking for that in a digital way, in a digital format, you should at least look at this thing. It's also early access, so like, be aware of that. But yeah, it's always nice to be like, hey, there's room on the block for more than one D20 based RPG on the PC this year. No offense to Larian, who I'm just waiting for Baldur's Gate to get out of early access, because that's a game that I know I'm going to want to play through all the way. And if I start it in early access, I'm just not going to play through it all the way. But it was cool to dip into this and see that, like, hey, this is. If you finished Baldur's Gate 3's, the content that's available for it now, and you're like, I would like to keep playing a game like this and maybe something a little bit crunchier, Solasta, go check it out. That's my pitch. Anything else? Cado, you got anything you want to shout out?
I was just going to specifically say that they shout out that they got permission to use the Dungeons and Dragons SRD 5.1 rule set. Like, that is the type of game it is. Like, that is the type of game it is, 100%. Like, no fucking around. It is 100% that game. Yeah. For better and worse, Any other things we want to shout out before we start to wrap up?
Last one. Yes. I played and finished a run of Signs of the Sojourner. I haven't said that out loud.
Sojourner.
Is that how you
I
say
think
it?
Sojourner.
Sojourner?
Yeah.
Sojourner? Which is a game that Austin, I know you and Cado both played it. I
totally.
think some months back, where the basic pitch is it's a visual novel communication game in which the interface in which you have conversations is using cards in which you have different symbols, and so you need to match those symbols up, and the complexity of how those match up or don't match up changes over time. Different people have different symbols, yada yada yada. I really liked the first half of this game. I guess I would say I'm so deeply impressed with the interface. Like, I was so not just charmed, but just impressed at how they managed to interpret communication in a different way, and in some ways manage to harness the emotion, like the true emotion and difficulty of communicating with people in a way that felt more true than just like picking a dialogue option. The words may be right, but it doesn't necessarily match the kind of emotive nature or what is left unsaid in how something is communicated. And just really fascinating from an interface perspective. And I only say the reason I didn't like the second half was, like, I liked the story in the second half. I just didn't like playing it because the game balance got really weird for me, where I thought I had a build set up for like the kind of story I wanted it to tell, where I was winning like 3/4 of the conversations and failing a fourth, which felt like pretty normal. Once you sort of settled on like kind of character and the kind of characters you wanted to interact with, because I was choosing to interact with ones that should match up with the build of cards I had. But then there's like a big event that happens about halfway, 2/3 through, that just I made a couple of like miscalculations on how much I should incorporate into my deck so that I could have conversations. And I was just failing like 90% of my conversations where it's like, well, this doesn't line up with the character arc. This doesn't line up with, this just felt like a raw deal that I was getting, where if I could make just a couple of, and the game does, for people who haven't played it, you are at the end of every conversation, you're getting a new card. So you have to burn a card that you do have to take on a card. A lot of the times you can just get the same card and replace it in your deck. So you can kind of keep your kind of like set of cards to be static. But it made, I don't know, it just didn't feel right. And I was able to kind of claw my way back to a semblance of where I wanted to be by the end. But it made the actual play part of the game very frustrating and didn't feel like it lined up with what they want. It didn't feel like it didn't line up with what they wanted me to do. And it didn't line up with what I wanted to do. And because starting the game over, like it is meant to be run based, we're like, oh, try something different. And like have cards that are, allow you to like fully explore this region better a second time around. I know the game's only like 3 to 4 hours long, but there'd be a lot of repetitive content for me to get to that point. And I would have preferred a game where, hey, like just let me start in a different region. Like give me a bunch of, I would have like much rather had, instead of 1 4-hour game, like a bunch of 1-hour stories that can go in a bunch of different directions and you start at different parts of the map. I just loved so much of what they set up as like the style that I hope they take another whack at it. But I left with such kind of like a raw taste in my mouth over the final hour. It's like, well, I don't want to go through those 2 hours just to get to the pivot points where I could then start exploring different regions and try to see what happened in the rest of the story. But I still think it's tremendous, probably in my top 10, just based on like the interface alone.
It's really cool.
I just love,
it's funny because
really, really cool.
You and I were talking about this the other day, and we both hit this exact same thing in our playthroughs, right? Of like and that's intentional, at least to some degree, that like the possibility of communication, or not the possibility, but the difficulty of communication, especially after there's this big event towards the end of the game that just totally fucks you up, because
it introduces a new symbol that just like it really
it's really clever, but it's
you have to really rethink your deck.
But it's funny because while we were having that conversation, I was like, I don't think I have another playthrough of it in me. But I was like, you know what? Maybe like 2 weeks from now, I'll have enough distance from my initial playthrough so I could do one more run through, and I would like, jam through the early stuff, make some bigger decisions or, differences in some early decisions that I could just get onto a different track to begin with. Or like try to anticipate where certain events would happen ahead of time and start building a deck out in different ways. And like maybe I'll do that. Maybe I'll get one more run through, and I'll see, with the knowledge I already have, will I be able to get ahead of some of that stuff this time?
Right.
Anyway, that game's cool. People should check that out. Is that on Switch
it's coming
yet?
It is. So it's funny. Like every time I've been playing one of these games, it's like, all right, this is a game from the spring. Like, has it been ported by the fall? And in the case of Umurangi and this, they are both coming to Switch. I don't have dates yet, and it's very easy to imagine how this game would function, really well on Switch. It would be based on how like the Switch fits into my life. Like part of the reason I don't want to do another run again is like I spend so much time at my desk. I now have a TV in my office because that's the 4K TV to play like the PS5 and the Xbox. Like, so then when like part of the reason I fell so far for Hades was like, oh, like I can sit and do this at my TV while football is on, and I can sit in like a really comfy chair. And so this game, I might be more inclined to do another run in Sojourner if I was like sitting in like it's not a big deal to like do the 90 minutes because I'm like watching an episode of some TV show with my wife and we're just relaxing, as opposed to like I'm gonna go sit at my desk and like sit with the mouse and keyboard and at the place that I work, and it like puts me in a different mindset. So that might be the kind of thing where I would play through it again on Switch, just because of the format change.
I do want to shout out that it has the first entire trip apparently available for free.
Cool.
If like you're like, I mean, fuck it, it's a rough year. Like maybe even the $20 is too much right now, but if you want to give it a try, it's available on Windows and Mac. Right now, it's just you search Steam for Signs of the Sojourner prologue, and it does the whole first trip for free. So definitely worth checking out.
And that's also long enough to like wrap your head. Like you'll play that prologue and be like, oh. like I get why they think this is so
yeah,
cool, even if you
100%.
don't get around to the rest of it. You'll definitely understand why it's interesting.
Totally. All right. I feel like we've gone long. Even if the podcast itself isn't long today, the recording process certainly was.
It's long enough.
It's long enough. This was a podcast.
There's some Demon Souls talk in there. I'll probably leave in.
You
I don't know.
can pull some of that Demon Soul stuff out. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Go ahead.
We'll figure it out. All right. I hope that everyone has a good week. We'll be back later this week with another episode of Waypoint Radio. Shoutouts as always to Bowen for letting us use the track Miss You off the EP Panel Machine. To find out more about that at waypoint.zone/BOEN. Where can people find you on the internet, Cado?
At @A_Cado_appears.
And Patrick.
You can find me at Patrick Klubik, noticing that Sekiro: Shadows Die Twice is the only FromSoft game that of the Souls canon that has the subtitle, but it's also the only one that is published by a Western publisher. Have to imagine FromSoft in their heart of hearts says, "Yo, this game is just called Sekiro."
Yeah, but even that feels wrong.
All their internal documents.
Yeah, I'm curious.
It's just Sekiro.
I'm curious. Sekiro's so good. I should replay Sekiro. All right.
Didn't that game just got a patch, right? Like a DLC, like the only DLC it's ever gonna get was
DLC. It's like a New Game Plus type
boss rush mode,
and
stuff like
which
that.
is fine. But like, I want content. I want new places to go to.
Hey, is this? We'll leave it here.
Elden Ring.
So
are we gonna?
So this, yeah. So this, it's not gonna happen between now and then. I was looking. I thought maybe our next podcast would be a discussion of the Game Awards, but that's unfortunately gonna have to happen next week because we're gonna record all day on Friday. So it's just not. It's not gonna work. But a week from now, like we could live in a. We know what Elden. Hope springs eternal.
When are the Game Awards? Game Awards are the
Thursday.
So we
night.
will not be able to talk about that stuff because we record.
No, because we have to do Game of the Year all day Friday.
Okay.
So I have to wait till Monday for that.
Gotcha.
But you can tell that one can tell when I'm getting a hopeful again when I'm like searching like the Reset Era Elden Ring threads like, hey, did that person who said was like leaking stuff and then they went away? And because they needed to take time to themselves, are they back? Like, what are our hints on what's going on with this game?
I feel like what do we expect to show up there that's actually anything?
I think there's gonna be a lot of shit. Actually, I think this is gonna be like there were a lot of games that were supposed to be announced at E3 that did not get announced and have not been announced this year. I think there is going to, and with E3 next year, who knows?
Are we getting Silent Hill? Or is it happening?
Man, so I've been kicking around for ages writing a story about like the Silent Hill community and like the Lucy with the football and the like the way in which like you see like different insiders like pop up claiming to have information in all sorts of different communities. And the Silent Hill one is just like you feel so bad because like man, there's just like a new prophet like every like year who's like no, they're really making a new one, and there's enough people that it seems like there's like where there's smoke there's fire.
Yeah.
I hope there's another bad Silent Hill game for those Silent Hill fans. And I count me among. I played Downpour.
Yeah,
I've played a lot of bad Silent Hill games. You're not
above
a Silent Hill stan. The way some others are. Although I really want to go play The Room at some point because I've heard that game is like surprising. That game
has some cool ideas.
I think there's be big shit.
Okay.
Well, it also wasn't a Silent Hill game to begin with. I believe it was a.
That's correct.
That's 100% the case. Given, same way that it sounds like the new Resident Evil Village was a non-Resident Evil game that was slapped Resident Evil.
How does that happen if you're Capcom? How do you stumble into making a different survival horror game? And be I guess we should just call this Resident Evil.
If you believe some of the insiders, one of which whose name is I'm forgetting off the top of my head, but has constantly had consistently good Capcom information, but is also someone who said like I'm gonna stop. I'm not gonna be one of those people anymore. I'm not leaking information anymore. Went right back to leaking information. But they've been right enough of times in the past that Capcom is just always making like 6 to 8 things that are in like various kinds of production that are in like survival horror, and this one was just like tested really well. And they were like, well, Resident Evil 8 proper is still like another 2 or 3 years off. Like we can retrofit this to be a Resident Evil game because Resident Evil can be whatever.
Yeah.
Werewolves, witches, sure, why not? Like whatever. Like it could be whatever you want. So
Breath of the Wild 2.
Yeah, at Patrick Klepek, you can follow me on.
There we go. Uh-huh.
Sure, Breath of the Wild 2. I bet there's gonna be a trailer for that.
That's my thought.
100%.
That's my thought.
Yes.
I think we'll get a new release date to get delayed by a couple of
Yeah.
Breath of the Wild 2 coming March 31st,
yes.
2021.
Finally.
And then I think we will probably get release dates or whatever for big Sony stuff, right? This is like Horizon will probably get a big trailer, and then that God of War, right?
Based on what I understand of Sony's the lineup they are aiming to have next year, okay, sure, that's a They are trying to have a lot of games come out next holiday. They're trying to have a lot of games coming out next holiday, and that I would be shocked if all of them make it. But yeah, that you would need to start putting down, this is coming out in spring, this is coming out in fall, sort of stuff. If they're going to make all, can I
say the biggest one for us three? Biggest rumor I've heard: we're going to get a new Smash competitor.
Oh shit!
At Game Awards, named Sora.
Great.
This is the big rumor.
Great. Yeah, finally.
Sora.
I
feel like that's in the Silent Hill category of like there's been a Sora rumor for 15 years.
There was a fucking Steve from Minecraft rumor for 15 years. Look at that. It happened.
Can't believe Steve beat Sora to Smash. It's so funny. All right. Us_Walker on Twitter. Cado, how about you?
I already said mine.
You already said yours. You follow Rob at Rob Zacny. You go to.
Sorry, my tangent was long enough that Austin got where he was on the outro.
You can follow Rob at Rob Zacny. You can follow everything we do, twitter.com/waypoint, waypoint.vice.com. You can go read Rob's review of Cyberpunk 2077. Headline is Cyberpunk 2077 is a crime epic with lots of good stories and big problems. So, there that is. We'll be back later this week. Until then, fuck capitalism. Go home.
Do your self-care, but I don't know what Rob we were getting back on Monday morning.
Oh,
what is this?
Regular kind.
That's
what is
bad.
this?
That's
Hold
bad.
on, we got to pause. The weird static.
Yeah.
Who's this from?
That's Rob.
Oh, it's on me and just kicked in.
Okay. It's all right, Rob.
Just try. Wait.
Cado, I'll figure it out.
Mute your cell phone. Wiggle the cables.
Well, don't wiggle them. It could make it worse.
Why? Well,
Can it get worse?
Unplug it. Yeah. Yes.
Unplug it, replug it in.
Yeah, that's the thing.
Oh my. Yeah.
Ooh.
What the? What is it?
Like ants crawling all over.
That didn't work.
No. What did you unplug? The XLR?
The XLR.
Try the other end. The one going to the computer. This sounds like a digital static to me. Although, I guess it could be some sort of interference. It's very strange.
Yeah, this used to happen. I can't remember what caused it. All right, I'm gonna log off the call rooms for a second.
Okay.
Yep.
Oof.
That was a lot.
Yeah.
Did Rob die?
I don't know.
I feel
I'm worried.
There's a gnarly feeling in the pit of my stomach right now. Like this has been just long enough that I feel like Rob is yelling at his computer by himself right now. Oh,
Okay.
Look. Hello?
I summoned him.
Rob's back.
What?
You were gone for an uncomfortably long amount of time. We began to worry.
We had a whole other conversation, came back around, and we're like, I hope Rob's okay.
I'm good. Do I sound okay?
Yeah.
Sound great.
Perfect. Round through time dot is again because I'm
of course
stopped.
I never stopped recording. But.
Me either.
Me either.
Okay. Good.
But Rob had to do a restart.
But I had.
Yeah.
So let's do another clap. You there, Rob?
Yeah, I'm there.
Let's do 30 seconds.
Excellent.
Cado, do you want us to just roll back into it?
Yeah. Yes.
All right. Patrick, do you want to do that setup you were doing, which was about how Rob took a big, taking a big swing?
So when Rob takes a big swing at a review, like even in our little chat room.
Hello.
Hi.
Yep. All right. Recording. Time.is.
My computer keeps blue screening when it comes back from sleep, like one every 7 times, and then I've Googled it's like just this weird driver thing.
Yeah.
You only remember to do something in a very specific context, and then it just leaves your memory to every.
Yep.
And this happens.
Oh yeah.
I'm like taking my PC from sleep. It crashed, and like, right, I should go and address that Realtek driver issue. But I'm waking my PC to do something, which means that immediately I'm like, right, I'll do that later, and then. Come back, it just does it again. It's like just inconsistent. It's like once every 10 wakes from sleep. So it's just not often enough for me to be like, oh, fuck it, I needed to sit here and do it.
You would be there when it happens where you don't have a specific thing to do. Yeah.
Hold on, I need to clear some hard drive space real quick.
Okay.
I can't tell if you're being sarcastic or
no, like seriously, it's like you have no hard drive space on this drive where the thing goes, and I was like, I didn't know that. What?
Whoops.
What's happening here? Reaper. Delete all of that. That should work. Okay.
All right, the Game Awards is this week.
They sure are.
Oh, so that's what Thursday pod is going to be. All right. Well, I forgot about that.
Yeah. Are we there? Are we good?
Yep.
All right. Let's do 28.
What?
What happened?
Who clapped very early?
It
Rob.
froze, and I tried to guess. It froze.
Tried to guess. Well, sir, you did not guess. You didn't.
I mean,
you did.
Start.
You did guess.
You did. It's okay. Listen, I know. I get it.
I wasn't 50. Looking.
Do you want to? Do you want to do one more?
We're good. 50.
50.
Oh, nice. I missed it.
You got it. That seemed good.
It sounded great.
Good.
That sounded great. That sounded good.
Let's figure it out. Let's not worry about it. We got
this.
Let's not worry
this
about
is
it.
The Eagles coaching staff talking to Carson Wentz. We did it. We believe in you.
Fucking nightmare. All right, let's just knock it out.
What's Doug Peterson said.
That is what he said. God.